On a quiet evening patrol, Officer Daniel spots a tiny black and tan puppy padding behind his squad car. At first he smiles until he notices the pup refusing to leave, eyes wide with urgent purpose. Each time Daniel drives off, the puppy sprints desperately to catch up, barking as if trying to speak. The air grows heavy with mystery. Why won't it stop? Is it lost, hurt, or leading him somewhere? Frustrated yet curious, the officer decided to follow, his heart pounding. What he found just minutes later didn't feel real. It wasn't a random stray, it was a cry for help. And the truth left the officer in tears. The late evening shift had been calm, almost too calm. Officer Daniel cruised along the quiet back roads of his small town, the low hum of the engine mixing with the distant chorus of crickets. Streetlights threw long, lazy shadows across empty sidewalks. After a week of chasing traffic violators and breaking up bar fights, this peaceful stretch of road felt like a rare gift. He rolled the window down a crack to let the cool night air in and reached for his coffee, savoring the rare moment when nothing demanded his attention. Then something darted across his peripheral vision. A small shape, quick and dark, flashed beneath the faint glow of a lamppost. Daniel instinctively eased his foot onto the brake and angled the cruiser toward the curb. At first he thought it might be a stray cat, but as the shape paused under the next light, he caught sight of a tiny black and tan puppy no bigger than a shoe. Its oversized ears stood alert, and its bright eyes glimmered like polished marbles in the darkness. Daniel chuckled softly and muttered to himself, "Well, aren't you a brave little thing?" He stepped out of the car expecting the puppy to bolt like most strays. Instead, it planted its tiny paws on the pavement and stared straight at him, tail giving a single nervous twitch. When he took a cautious step forward, the pup backed up only an inch, then gave a soft yip, almost like a plea rather than a bark. "Hey there, buddy." "You lost?" Daniel crouched low, extending a hand. The puppy sniffed the air but didn't approach. After a tense beat, it turned abruptly and padded a few feet down the road, then stopped and looked back at him. The gesture was deliberate, almost expectant. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You want me to follow?" He stood there for a moment, debating. Maybe it belonged to someone nearby. Maybe it was just a stubborn stray. Yet something about the pup's unwavering gaze felt different, urgent. Behind him, the patrol car's radio crackled softly, routine chatter filling the quiet night. But Daniel barely heard it. The tiny creature had captured his full attention, and an inexplicable tug in his gut told him this was no ordinary encounter. Daniel finally exhaled and straightened up, brushing dust from his knees. "All right, little one, stay safe," he murmured, turning back toward his cruiser. The night was still calm, the kind of shift where a warm drink and the radio's soft crackle could lull a cop into forgetting the world's troubles. He slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and slowly pulled away. But in the rearview mirror, two tiny points of motion caught his eye. The puppy was trotting right down the center of the road, ears bouncing with every determined step. Daniel frowned and eased to a stop. Maybe coincidence, he told himself. He put the car back into gear and drove a little faster. Moments later, a faint but insistent tap-tap of paws against asphalt reached his ears even over the engine. He checked the mirror again. There it was, still chasing the squad car, legs pumping furiously, refusing to give up. "This can't be real," he muttered. He pulled over a second time. The puppy skidded to a halt beside the patrol car, chest heaving, tongue out. As soon as Daniel opened his door, the little creature yipped once and trotted a few paces ahead, stopping to glance back at him. The movement wasn't random. It was purposeful. Daniel crouched beside the road, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "You've got some stamina for something so small," he said softly. "What are you trying to tell me?" Again the puppy barked, sharp and urgent, then turned, trotting farther down the road before stopping to wait. A shiver of unease threaded through Daniel's calm. Lost dogs didn't behave like this. Most wandered aimlessly or begged for food. This one had a mission. He stood, rubbing his chin. Protocol said he should call animal control and resume his patrol, but instinct whispered otherwise. Something about the little dog's unwavering focus gnawed at him, as though the night itself was pulling him forward. Daniel closed his cruiser door with a decisive click and followed on foot, the rhythmic patter of tiny paws leading the way into the deepening dark. The quiet road soon narrowed into a tree-lined lane, where moonlight pooled in silver patches and shadows stretched like dark fingers across the ground. Daniel's boots crunched softly on gravel as he trailed the tiny guide. Every few yards, the puppy stopped, turned its head to be sure he was still coming, and gave a short, urgent yip before moving on. The rhythm of the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if listening. Daniel's trained eye began to catch details he'd missed at first. Small claw marks etched into the soft dirt. A faint trail of flattened grass veering off the main path, fresh, not more than an hour old. He crouched briefly, brushing his gloved hand over the cool earth. The prints were too small for anything but the pup. But there was something else, a scuff that looked human, as though a shoe had slipped in haste. "Someone's been here," he murmured under his breath. His hand instinctively rested on the flashlight clipped to his belt. The puppy whined suddenly, nose twitching as it sniffed the breeze, then let out a sharp bark and bounded ahead. Daniel followed, senses sharpening. The night air carried an undercurrent he couldn't name, damp earth tinged with something metallic, faint but distinct. Not blood, he hoped, but something that made his pulse tighten. A distant owl hooted, breaking the silence, and Daniel felt a prickle along the back of his neck. Training had taught him to trust that feeling. This was no casual stroll. Something about the animal's urgency told a story beyond words. He paused and scanned the darkness with his flashlight. Branches swayed, casting restless shadows. Nothing moved except the little dog, now sitting a few yards ahead, eyes glowing like twin embers in the beam. Daniel drew a steadying breath. "All right, partner," he said softly, the word partner surprising even himself. "Show me." The puppy gave one last insistent bark and turned again toward the narrowing path. Daniel adjusted his radio, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and followed, each step carrying him deeper into a mystery that felt less like chance and more like fate. The narrow lane bled into an old service road, its cracked asphalt swallowed by creeping weeds and moss. Daniel slowed his pace, careful of the uneven ground. The night had thickened. Clouds slid across the moon, dimming the silver light and leaving only the glow of his flashlight and the pup's quick, darting silhouette to guide him. Each breath carried the crisp bite of pine and the faint metallic scent that had unsettled him earlier. The puppy trotted ahead with tireless energy, its small frame a black and tan flicker in the darkness. Every so often it paused, ears pricked, then darted forward again as if on a deadline only it understood. Daniel's boots scraped softly against the gravel, echoing in the otherwise hushed woods. The deeper they went, the more the outside world faded until it felt like they were the last living beings on Earth. A sudden rustle in the underbrush snapped Daniel's attention sideways. He swung his light toward the sound, just wind teasing dry leaves, or so it seemed. But the forest's silence afterward was unnerving. No traffic hum, no distant chatter, only the faint patter of paws and his own heartbeat. "Where are you taking me, little one?" he whispered, his voice swallowed by the trees. The puppy stopped at a fork in the overgrown path. It sniffed the air, circled once, then chose the left trail without hesitation. Daniel hesitated only a moment before following, his instincts overriding protocol. Dispatch was still within reach of his radio, but something told him this wasn't a call to make yet. Branches clawed at his sleeves as the trail tightened. A chill settled over the woods, denser and heavier than the cool evening air. Somewhere ahead, water trickled faintly, a sound almost hidden by the quiet. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight and quickened his stride to match the puppy's pace. Whatever waited at the end of this path felt close enough that the forest itself seemed to lean in, urging him forward. The puppy gave a sharp bark, a sound of both urgency and command, and darted deeper into the black tunnel of trees. The trail narrowed until it was barely more than a deer path. Daniel ducked under low branches and stepped over knotted roots that snaked across the ground like hidden traps. Each step crunched damp leaves and snapped twigs, a sharp contrast to the puppy's silent, determined trot. Above, the moon disappeared behind heavy clouds, plunging the woods into a deeper shade of black. The flashlight's beam seemed to shrink, swallowed by the thick night. Halfway around a bend, the beam caught something abrupt, a fallen tree blocking the path. Bark splintered outward where it had cracked, and a faint scent of sap mixed with damp earth. Daniel stopped, scanning for a way around. The trunk stretched wide, thick with tangled vines. Climbing over would be risky in the dark. The puppy reached the tree and leapt at the bark with tiny, desperate scratches, then circled back to Daniel, yipping sharply. It darted left, nosing into a gap between two bushes, a barely visible side trail, "All right, you've got a better plan," Daniel murmured. He crouched, pushing through the narrow opening. Branches snagged his jacket and scraped against his flashlight. For a moment he had to crouch low, practically crawling to keep up with the tiny guide. A sudden snap of a branch echoed nearby. Daniel froze, heart thudding. The sound hadn't come from the puppy. He swept the flashlight in a wide arc. Shadows leapt across tree trunks, but nothing moved. The forest remained eerily silent, as if holding its breath after the noise. The puppy whined, impatient, and pawed at his boot. The touch snapped Daniel out of his tension. Okay, he whispered, forcing a slow breath. They pressed on, emerging into a small clearing where the ground sloped downward. A slick patch of mud nearly sent Daniel sliding, but he caught himself on a low branch. Ahead, the puppy barked again, short, sharp, insistent, its tiny body quivering with urgency. Daniel steadied himself and scanned the dark, his nerves stretched tight. This wasn't just a stray dog's wandering route. Every turn, every obstacle felt like a deliberate test leading him somewhere critical, somewhere he had to reach before it was too late. Daniel steadied his breath and followed the puppy down the slippery slope, his boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. The air grew heavier with every step, carrying a faint metallic tang that pricked at the edges of his senses. It was stronger now, unmistakable, though he still couldn't name it. His gut tightened. The forest around him had gone unnaturally quiet. The normal night sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, distant owls, had faded into a thick, almost humming silence. It felt as though the woods themselves were listening. He adjusted the grip on his flashlight, the small cone of light barely piercing the dark. A sudden sound shattered the stillness, clang. A sharp metallic echo reverberated through the trees, distant yet startlingly clear. Daniel froze mid-step, heart thudding hard enough to feel in his throat. That wasn't an animal sound. It was something man-made, metal striking metal, quick and abrupt. The puppy jumped at the noise but didn't retreat. Instead, it barked once, high and urgent, then pushed forward with renewed speed. Daniel instinctively reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, he said in a low voice. "Possible incident near Old Creek Woods, investigating, stand by." Static hissed softly in reply, but no immediate response came. The dense canopy might be muffling his signal. "Great," he muttered under his breath. The puppy darted ahead, pausing just long enough to ensure he followed. As they pressed deeper, Daniel caught another fleeting clue, a faint wisp of smoke curling in the beam of his flashlight. He squinted. The scent was sharp, mixed with the metallic edge he'd been noticing. Burnt rubber? Heated metal? Whatever it was, it didn't belong in these quiet woods. Branches creaked above him, making him flinch before realizing it was just the breeze stirring the canopy. Still, the forest felt alive in a different way, alert, waiting. Daniel picked up his pace, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Something was happening out here, something urgent and dangerous. And somehow this little dog knew exactly where to lead him. Daniel's breathing quickened as he pushed deeper into the woods, the puppy trotting a few feet ahead with unwavering purpose. The rhythmic crunch of his boots over damp earth became a steady drumbeat in the silence. With every step, fragments of memory began to surface, echoes of another night when he'd felt this same creeping urgency. Years ago, early in his career, there had been a missing child case. A little boy wandered from a campsite and vanished into the forest. Daniel remembered the frantic search, the weight of responsibility, the way every rustle of leaves sent his heart racing. They'd found the boy just in time, shivering near a creek as dawn broke. That rescue had changed him. It reminded him that instinct could mean the difference between life and death. The puppy barked once, sharp and insistent, snapping Daniel back to the present. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. That old case had taught him a truth he never forgot. When something deep inside warned you to act, you didn't question, you followed. The little dog slowed briefly, waiting until Daniel caught up, then pressed on with even greater urgency. Its determination was remarkable, almost human in its intent. Daniel felt a strange kinship forming, as though the pup understood not just the path but the stakes. He thought of the people who might be out here, lost hikers, a stranded driver, maybe a child like that boy years ago. The metallic scent in the air, the echo of metal on metal, the faint smoke, they weren't coincidences. They were clues, and the dog was piecing them together in ways Daniel couldn't yet see. A flicker of resolve tightened his chest. "I'm with you, buddy," he whispered more to himself than to the dog. "Whatever this is, we're in it together." The puppy's ears twitched as if it understood. It gave a short, encouraging bark and bounded forward. Daniel followed without hesitation, every step driven by a silent vow. Whatever waited ahead, he wouldn't let history repeat itself. Tonight, no one would be lost on his watch. The woods deepened into a quiet that pressed on Daniel's ears like heavy cloth. His flashlight cut a narrow path through the blackness, catching glimpses of low shrubs and thick trunks slick with moss. The puppy trotted just ahead, nose low, zigzagging with restless purpose. Then, without warning, it stopped and pawed at something half buried in the leaves. Daniel knelt, brushing away damp foliage. His beam caught a flash of bright color, a small plastic toy car, its blue paint scratched and dirty. A child's toy, out here in the middle of nowhere. His pulse quickened. He turned it over in his gloved hands. The wheels were still intact, but the surface felt cold and freshly damp, as though it hadn't been there long. A few steps farther, the puppy barked sharply at another find, a piece of fabric snagged on a low branch. Daniel carefully freed it. The cloth was soft and patterned with tiny stars, the kind used for baby blankets. A thread of dread wound tight in his chest. First a toy, now this. These weren't random litter. They were breadcrumbs. He swept the flashlight in a slow arc, broken twigs, a faint indentation where something or someone might have slid down the muddy incline. The faint metallic smell he'd been chasing all evening grew stronger, mixing with the subtle scent of engine oil. Daniel's jaw tightened. "There's someone out here," he whispered. The words felt heavy in the thick air. The puppy gave a low whine, circling back to him before darting forward again. It didn't just lead, it urged, almost pleading. Images flashed in Daniel's mind. A stranded vehicle hidden off-road, a family waiting helplessly for rescue, maybe injured. The stakes sharpened with every clue. He rose, heart pounding, and adjusted his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Possible accident in the woods near Old Creek. I'm continuing on foot," he said, hoping the signal pierced the dense canopy. Static answered, faint but alive. Ahead, the puppy yipped again, its tiny body quivering with urgency. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight and followed, each step carrying the weight of someone else's unseen crisis. The trail grew wilder, narrowing until branches scraped Daniel's shoulders and wet leaves brushed his face. The ground softened to a spongy carpet of moss and mud, muffling his footsteps but making each step more treacherous. Overhead, the moon fought to break through heavy clouds, casting brief silver flickers that vanished as quickly as they came. Only the sharp beam of his flashlight and the puppy's quick movements cut through the darkness. The little dog pressed ahead with tireless focus. Every so often it stopped to glance back, its eyes glowing faintly in the beam, then bounded forward again. Daniel followed, careful but urgent, heart pounding harder with every step. The metallic scent was stronger now, tinged with something smoky and faintly chemical. Whatever waited ahead wasn't just a hiker's campfire. A sudden snap of twigs echoed through the trees. Daniel halted and swept the light across the dense undergrowth. Shadows shifted like living things, but nothing emerged. His hand brushed the grip of his service weapon by instinct, though he kept it holstered. He wasn't chasing a suspect, at least not yet. The puppy gave a short, commanding bark, breaking the silence. Daniel exhaled and pressed on, ducking under a low-hanging branch. His boots slid on slick earth as the path tilted downward into a shallow ravine. Cold air pooled there, thick and damp, carrying a new sound. Faint dripping water, slow and steady, like the tick of a hidden clock. He paused, listening. Beneath the water's rhythm was something softer, an intermittent, almost human sound. A muffled cry, or just wind threading through the trees. His pulse quickened at the thought. The puppy's bark turned sharp and urgent. It dashed ahead to a narrow break in the brush where the ground dipped sharply out of sight. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight and crouched to follow, his heart drumming louder than the distant water. Every instinct screamed that they were close to the truth of those scattered clues, close to whatever danger or tragedy had drawn a tiny dog out into the night to find help. Daniel slid carefully down the muddy slope, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. The puppy was already waiting at the bottom, tail rigid, ears pricked forward as though listening to something Daniel couldn't yet hear. The air here felt different, cooler, heavier, and alive with a quiet tension. Then he heard it. A faint, irregular sound beneath the whisper of trees and dripping water. At first it seemed like a trick of the wind. But as he held his breath and listened harder, it grew clearer. A thin, wavering cry that rose and fell like someone calling for help, but too weak to form words. His heart slammed against his ribs. "Hello?" he called, voice echoing off unseen trees. "This is Officer Daniel. Can you hear me?" The only answer was a whimper from the puppy and the faint continuation of that fragile noise. It wasn't an animal. It was human. Daniel swept the flashlight in wide arcs. The beam landed on a narrow gully hidden beneath thick brush, where tire tracks scarred the soft earth and led to something metallic glinting faintly under a pile of broken branches. He caught his breath. There, half buried and tilted at an unnatural angle, was the outline of a vehicle. The puppy barked sharply, pacing at the edge of the gully as if urging him to hurry. Daniel slid down the last few feet, boots sinking into cold mud. His light revealed a car's rear bumper crushed against a tree trunk, its windows fogged and smeared. Inside, a faint movement flickered. A hand? A shadow? The weak cry came again, unmistakable now, carrying desperation and pain. Adrenaline surged through Daniel. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. He shouted into his radio. "Found a vehicle off Old Creek Trail with possible occupants inside. Request immediate medical and rescue units." Static hissed, but he barely waited for a reply. The puppy's anxious barks filled the night, echoing off the ravine walls. Daniel scrambled closer, heart pounding, knowing with a cold certainty that every second now mattered. Whatever had brought this tiny dog to him wasn't chance. It was a desperate plea for help, and time was running out. Daniel lunged the final few feet to the wreck, the puppy bounding beside him with frantic yips. His flashlight beam swept across twisted metal and shattered glass, revealing the vehicle's crumpled front end, wedged between two massive oaks. Steam hissed faintly from beneath the bent hood, carrying that metallic, smoky scent that had haunted him for miles. "Is anyone inside?" he called, voice tight with urgency. A weak moan answered from within. Daniel's pulse spiked. He shone the light through a smeared side window and froze. Inside, barely visible through the fogged glass, sat a young woman slumped over the steering wheel. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, face pale and streaked with dried tears. "Ma'am!" "It's the police." "I'm here to help." The woman stirred faintly, lifting her head just enough for him to see the fear in her half-open eyes. Beside her, strapped in a car seat, a tiny infant whimpered softly. The thin cry Daniel had heard now pierced the air like a desperate alarm. Adrenaline surged through him. He tried the driver's side door, jammed tight. He rushed to the passenger side and yanked with all his strength, but the frame was twisted from the impact. Every second felt stolen. "Hold on!" he shouted, more to keep them awake than anything else. He yanked his radio again. "Dispatch, urgent. Single vehicle crash off Old Creek Trail. Adult female and infant inside. Driver unconscious but responsive. I need EMS and rescue now." Static crackled before a faint voice replied, promising units en route. The puppy barked furiously, circling the wreck and pawing at the metal as though trying to dig them free. Daniel's heart clenched at the sight of the tiny hero working alongside him. He grabbed his emergency tool from the belt and smashed the side window with a sharp crack, shards cascading like ice. The cold air rushed in. "It's okay," he said, leaning inside carefully. "Help is coming." "Stay with me," the mother blinked weakly, lips trembling. She tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. Daniel gently squeezed her shoulder, eyes darting to the infant, who let out another frail cry. In that moment, the mystery of the persistent puppy crystallized. It hadn't been lost at all. It had been sent. A tiny, desperate messenger leading him to a hidden tragedy before time could run out. Glass crunched beneath Daniel's elbows as he leaned through the shattered window. The interior smelled of burned rubber and cold metal, thick with the faint sweetness of leaking coolant. The young woman's breath came in shallow gasps, each one weaker than the last. The baby whimpered, small fists twitching in the dim light. "You're both going to be okay," Daniel said, keeping his voice steady though adrenaline surged like a live wire through his chest. "Help is on the way. Just stay with me." He quickly checked the mother's pulse, fast but faint. A thin line of blood trickled down her temple. Her seatbelt was locked tight, twisted from the impact. Daniel gritted his teeth and reached for his rescue knife. One clean slice through the strap freed her, but she barely moved. "Come on, stay awake," he urged, gently bracing her neck as he eased her backward. The puppy stood on hind legs at the door's edge, barking and whining in frantic bursts as if urging him to hurry. Next was the baby. The car seat had shifted, wedged awkwardly between the console and the crushed door frame. Daniel's hands shook as he worked the latch, careful not to jostle the child. At last the buckle clicked free, and he lifted the infant into his arms. The baby's cry strengthened slightly at the sudden movement. A good sign. Red and blue lights flickered faintly through the trees. Back up at last. "Over here," Daniel shouted into the night. Two paramedics burst through the underbrush with a stretcher and medical kits. "Female driver and infant, possible head trauma and internal injuries," Daniel reported quickly, handing the baby to the first medic. They moved with swift precision. One checked the infant's vitals while the other stabilized the mother's neck and started oxygen. "Pulse weak but holding," the medic confirmed. "We need to transport immediately." The puppy yipped anxiously as they secured the stretcher. Daniel rested a hand on its small head. "You did it, little one," he whispered, feeling a lump rise in his throat. As the team lifted the mother and baby toward the waiting ambulance, Daniel followed close behind, heart pounding with both urgency and awe. A tiny dog's relentless courage had turned a silent forest into a life-saving rescue, and the night was far from over. The ambulance's interior glowed with sterile white light, a stark contrast to the dark forest outside. Daniel climbed in behind the paramedics as they worked swiftly, checking vitals and starting IV lines. The infant, now wrapped in a warm blanket, gave soft, steady cries, music to Daniel's ears. The young mother, pale and weak, drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow but stable. As the vehicle rumbled toward the hospital, Daniel knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Your baby's safe too. We're almost there." Her eyelids fluttered. For a moment he thought she might not respond. Then with a fragile breath she whispered, "Lucky, you found us." Daniel offered a reassuring smile. "Your puppy found me," he corrected softly. "That little hero wouldn't let me go." Her eyes flicked open wider at the word puppy. "Puppy?" she echoed, voice faint but threaded with wonder. "Yes," Daniel said. "Small, black and tan. Followed me for miles. Led me straight to you." A tear welled in the woman's eye. "Not stray," she managed. "Our Bella had pups last month. We left them at home when we went for a drive. One must have followed." Her voice cracked into a weak sob. "She came all this way to save us." The realization settled like a weight and a blessing all at once. The little dog wasn't lost at all. Against every instinct of distance and danger, it had escaped home and tracked them through miles of woods to find help. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "She did more than save you," he said softly, glancing at the puppy curled in his lap, finally resting but still alert. "She might have saved 2 lives tonight." The mother closed her eyes, tears slipping down her pale cheeks. "Bella's baby," she whispered with a trembling smile. "Our angel." The paramedic met Daniel's gaze with quiet awe. "That dog knew," he murmured. Somehow it knew. Daniel stroked the puppy's tiny head, his chest swelling with gratitude and disbelief. In all his years on the force, he had never witnessed loyalty so pure or a rescue so miraculous. The hospital's emergency bay blazed with light as the ambulance skidded to a halt. The back doors swung open and a team of doctors and nurses surged forward. Daniel stepped aside while paramedics smoothly transferred the stretcher to waiting hands. Monitors beeped urgently, voices overlapped in brisk commands, and then the mother and baby disappeared through double doors toward the trauma unit. Daniel followed to the edge of the hallway, the puppy cradled carefully in his arms. Its tiny body trembled from exhaustion, but its dark eyes remained fixed on the retreating stretcher. "They'll be okay," Daniel whispered, though his own chest still throbbed with adrenaline. Minutes stretched into an aching hour. Daniel paced the corridor, occasionally glancing down at the little dog curled against his chest. Nurses passed with hurried steps. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Each time a door opened, the puppy lifted its head expectantly, ears twitching as if listening for familiar voices. Finally, a doctor emerged, his face calm but marked with fatigue. "They're stable," he said with a tired smile. "The mother has a mild concussion and internal bruising, but no life-threatening injuries. The baby is healthy. You got them here just in time." Relief hit Daniel like a sudden warm wave. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The puppy gave a small, contented whimper, as though it understood. A nurse knelt to pet the little hero, shaking her head in wonder. "This tiny one deserves a medal," she said softly. Daniel smiled and gently scratched the pup's ears. "More than a medal," he replied. "She deserves a family that knows exactly what she's capable of." The puppy rested its chin on his arm, eyes half closed but still alert, as if refusing to rest until every danger had passed. In that quiet moment, Daniel felt something shift inside him. A deep connection formed not just through duty, but through shared purpose and unspoken trust. For the first time all night, the weight of urgency lifted. The rescue was complete, but a new bond had taken root, one that felt every bit as permanent as the lives they had just saved together. Dawn's first light spilled through the hospital windows, washing the quiet corridor in pale gold. The chaos of the night had finally ebbed. Daniel sat on a bench near the maternity wing, the tiny black and tan puppy curled against his chest like a warm heartbeat. For the first time since his patrol began, the world felt still. A soft shuffle of footsteps drew his attention. The young mother, pale but smiling weakly, approached in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. Her baby slept peacefully in her arms. She looked at Daniel with misted eyes. "They told me everything," she whispered. "You saved us." Daniel shook his head gently. "I only followed the real hero," he said, glancing down at the puppy now gazing up with sleepy eyes. The woman's lips trembled into a grateful smile. "Bella's little one," she murmured. "Please, thank her for me." She extended a hand to stroke the pup's tiny head, tears glistening on her cheeks. "She's our miracle." The puppy responded with a soft whine, pressing its nose to the woman's fingers as if recognizing its family. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This small creature had braved dark woods, hidden ravines, and endless obstacles simply to bring help. No training, no reason beyond pure devotion, just a boundless instinct to protect life. After the mother and child were wheeled back to their room, Daniel remained on the bench, stroking the pup's silky ears. The night's adrenaline drained away, replaced by a profound stillness that carried its own weight. He thought of all the calls he had answered over the years, all the rescues and tragedies, and how this one, led by a creature barely big enough to climb a curb, would stay with him forever. Sunlight streamed brighter through the glass, warming them both. The puppy gave a final contented sigh and nestled deeper into his jacket. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes, unashamed as they fell. "You saved 2 lives tonight, little angel," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. And in that quiet morning light, Officer Daniel understood that heroism sometimes comes on 4 tiny paws, wrapped in courage far bigger than its size, a bond of trust and love he would carry for the rest of his life.